She vanished from their lives and returned with a new name. The day their daughter made this choice, her parents faced a truth they never expected, and the consequences rippled through their home. Linda Thompson's morning began in the usual way: a mug of strong coffee, the faint rattle of the air conditioner, and the pale light filtering through the kitchen blinds. The house felt too quiet, as it often did these days, each footstep echoing off walls that used to thrum with laughter, music, and the endless energy of a teenager. She stood by the counter, staring at a grocery list she'd started 3 days ago, unable to remember what it was she'd run out of. Her husband, Mark, shuffled in, bleary-eyed and silent, setting his phone on the table with a clatter. He barely glanced at Linda, already absorbed in reading the day's news on his screen. They moved around each other in practiced silence, the old routines of marriage now worn thin. Linda wanted to ask if he'd heard from Sophie, wanted to say something, anything, that would bridge the distance that had grown between all of them. But the words stuck in her throat. She busied herself with chores, loading the dishwasher, folding towels, watering the drooping fern in the hallway. Each task felt like an anchor, holding her in place while the rest of the world rushed on. She stopped at the door to Sophie's old room, hand resting on the knob. Inside, nothing had changed. The comforter was still rumpled from her last visit, posters clung to the walls, a bookshelf sagged with childhood favorites and teenage obsessions. On the dresser, a row of perfume bottles gathered dust. Linda lingered by the window, watching a pair of blue jays flit across the backyard. Her phone vibrated on the bed, a message from her sister, asking about the family reunion. Linda replied with a non-committal, "We're fine. Just busy." She didn't mention that she hadn't spoken to Sophie in weeks, or that every day without a call felt heavier than the last. The quiet was broken by the sound of the mail slot clattering. Linda went to the front door and scooped up the stack of envelopes, bills, catalogs, and a thick manila envelope with Sophie's handwriting on the front. Her heart skipped. She called to Mark, but he didn't answer. Back in the kitchen, Linda sat at the table, turning the envelope over and over in her hands. She thought of all the letters she'd sent to Sophie during her first year at college. Care packages stuffed with snacks, notes written in her loopy cursive, reminders to eat well, to call home. Lately, the replies had dwindled, then stopped altogether. Finally, she opened the envelope. Inside, she found a single, neatly typed letter and a stack of legal forms. At the top of the letter was a salutation, "Dear Mom and Dad," formal, almost cold. Linda's hands shook as she read. Sophie wrote about her decision to take control of her life, to step fully into adulthood. She described a need for distance, a wish to define her own identity. The letter was full of language that felt rehearsed, almost as if Sophie were reciting a script she didn't quite believe. Then, the real shock: the forms were for a legal name change. Sophie was no longer Sophie Thompson. She had chosen a new name, one Linda and Mark had never heard before. Linda felt as if the world had tilted sideways. She turned to Mark, who was already reading the letter over her shoulder. His face drained of color. What is this?" he whispered. They sat in stunned silence, the weight of the news settling over them like a suffocating blanket. The letter went on to explain the process, the reasons, the new name, carefully chosen, symbolic, and entirely hers. There was no anger in the words, just a steady, relentless finality. Linda reached for the phone, her hands trembling. She tried Sophie's number, but it rang and rang before going to voicemail. Mark said nothing, just stared at the letter, his jaw clenched. Linda left a message anyway, her voice thin and shaky. "Sophie, honey, we got your letter. Please call us. We just want to talk. We love you." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Mark called the family lawyer, desperate for answers. Linda wandered from room to room, unable to settle, her mind racing with memories. Sophie's first steps, the science fair projects, late-night talks after heartbreaks. Now, it felt as if all of those moments belonged to someone else. As evening fell, Linda and Mark sat together in the living room, letter and legal documents spread across the coffee table. They argued quietly about what had gone wrong, who was to blame, what they should do next. Outside, the neighborhood was alive with children riding bikes and neighbors chatting on porches. Inside, the Thompson house felt like a world apart, adrift and silent. When Linda finally went to bed, she paused at Sophie's door once more. She pressed her forehead to the wood, a silent plea hanging in the darkness. The girl she'd raised, the daughter she thought she knew, was suddenly a stranger with a new name. Linda woke early, the weight of the previous day's letter pressing heavy on her chest. Sunlight leaked through the curtains, illuminating the stack of legal documents still sitting on the kitchen counter. She lay in bed, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside her, wondering if he'd slept at all. When she finally got up, she found him already dressed, staring blankly at the kitchen table, the letter and forms spread out before him. Mark looked up, his eyes tired. "I checked her social media. Everything's changed. Her name, her picture. She deleted half her old posts. It's like she's trying to erase us." Linda poured 2 cups of coffee, her hands shaking. Maybe it's just a phase. Maybe she's going through something. She hoped saying it out loud would make it true. The house felt colder than usual, every noise amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, the thump of the newspaper landing on the porch. Linda wandered from room to room, searching for some sign of Sophie. In her daughter's bedroom, she sat on the bed, rifling through old yearbooks, prom photos, a box of ribbons and medals. Nothing offered an explanation. Mark called the family lawyer. The conversation was short and tense. "It's legal, Mark. She's an adult. She doesn't need your consent. All you can do is respect her decision," the lawyer explained gently. Mark hung up, frustrated. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "She was always close to us. She told us everything." Unable to sit still, Linda decided to visit her sister, Mary Ann, across town. She bundled up a container of muffins, something to do with her hands, and drove the familiar route through the quiet suburbs. Mary Ann answered the door in her bathrobe, eyes wide as she listened to Linda's story. "Kids these days," she sighed, pouring coffee. "They want to be so different. Maybe she just needs space. She'll come back to you." Linda wanted to believe it, but her heart twisted with doubt. Over the next hour, she and Mary Ann combed through possible reasons. Was it the pressure of college? New friends? A secret boyfriend? Did Sophie resent the way Linda had always checked her grades, set curfews, asked about her friends? "She never said anything," Linda insisted. "She always seemed happy." Back at home, Mark went through the motions of yard work, but his mind was elsewhere. He trimmed the hedges too close, accidentally nicked the garden hose, cursed quietly under his breath. When a neighbor waved hello, Mark just nodded, not in the mood for small talk. Everyone on their block knew Sophie. She'd babysat their kids, helped organize block parties, played piano at holiday gatherings. Now, he wondered what to say if someone asked where she was. That afternoon, Linda searched Sophie's old laptop for clues. She scrolled through emails, half-written poems, digital journals, most of it ordinary, some of it bittersweet. One document, labeled "For Later," caught her eye. It was a list, books to read, places to visit, people who'd inspired her. There were no angry rants, no signs of rebellion, just a quiet longing for something more. Unable to resist, Linda called Sophie's college roommate, Hannah. The call was awkward. "Is she okay?" Linda asked, voice low. "She's different lately," Hannah admitted. "Hanging out with new people. Always at meetings or study groups. She said she was starting fresh, but I didn't realize it meant all this." Linda thanked her and hung up, no closer to understanding. She found Mark on the back porch, staring out at the yard. She handed him the document, watched him read in silence. The sun set behind the fence, casting long shadows across the grass. Mark spoke first. "We can't force her to talk. We can't make her be who she was." Linda's voice trembled. "But we're her parents. Aren't we supposed to know her?" That night, Linda cooked Sophie's favorite dinner, chicken parmesan, garlic bread, a salad with strawberries. She and Mark ate in silence, each lost in their own worries. Afterward, Linda packed away the leftovers and turned off the kitchen light, her heart aching for the daughter she could no longer reach. Before bed, she checked her phone for messages one last time. Nothing. She sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, clutching a pillow to her chest, and stared out the window into the dark, hoping for any sign, any signal, that her little girl was still out there somewhere, waiting or maybe just lost. Morning in the Thompson house arrived with a sense of dread, not routine. Mark left early for work, leaving Linda alone in a house that felt even emptier than the day before. The legal documents remained on the kitchen table, a silent presence at every meal. As Linda made herself breakfast, she found her appetite gone. She settled for black coffee and half a slice of toast, picking at the edges before tossing it away. Determined not to be swallowed by grief, Linda threw herself into chores. She vacuumed every room, scrubbed bathroom tiles, sorted through laundry, and rearranged the shelves in the living room. Each drawer or cabinet she opened revealed some echo of Sophie. Old birthday cards tucked behind a stack of board games, a pair of ballet slippers, dried corsages from high school dances. Linda lingered over every keepsake, remembering the girl who once filled these rooms with energy and dreams. By mid-morning, her phone buzzed, a message from her friend Nancy. Saw something about Sophie on Facebook. Are you okay? Linda's hands trembled as she opened her laptop. Sophie's profile was nearly unrecognizable. New name, new photo, none of the familiar childhood albums. Publicly, Sophie had posted a long, carefully worded note explaining her decision to embrace a life more in line with her true self. She thanked old friends and mentors, but made no mention of family. Comments flooded in. Some offered congratulations and support. Others asked questions. Linda scrolled endlessly, her heart aching at the way Sophie responded to strangers' encouragement but ignored her own parents. She considered leaving a comment, typing and erasing a dozen drafts, finally closing the browser in frustration. The phone rang again. This time, it was the church committee chair, Mrs. Winslow, asking if Linda could still help with the upcoming fundraiser. Linda said yes, anything to avoid thinking. She spent the next 2 hours assembling silent auction baskets, wrapping candles, sorting through donated books. But even as she worked, conversation swirled around her. Have you heard from Sophie? I saw the news online. I hope she's okay. Linda smiled, nodded, repeated the same polite answers. Inside, she felt like an imposter, performing normalcy while her world was unraveling. That afternoon, Mark came home early. He tossed his briefcase on the sofa and sat beside Linda in silence. She handed him her phone, showing him Sophie's post. Mark read it slowly, his jaw clenched, then set the phone down. She's made up her mind, he said. But what about us? Linda whispered. Later, Mark went to mow the lawn, seeking distraction in the steady rumble of the mower and the familiar lines he carved into the grass. Neighbors waved as he passed, but he offered little more than a nod. Linda watched him from the kitchen window, feeling both close to and distant from the man she'd shared a life with for over 20 years. Dinner was quiet. Mark picked at his food, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Afterward, he retreated to the garage to work on the car, leaving Linda to wash dishes and stare at the calendar. Sophie's birthday was in a week, usually a time for celebration, for homemade cake and a house full of laughter. Now, Linda didn't know what to do. Should she call? Send a card? Ignore it altogether? After cleaning up, Linda slipped out for a walk around the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air would clear her mind. She passed familiar houses, each with its own constellation of memories, sleepovers, Halloween parades, summer cookouts. She remembered Sophie running ahead on her bicycle, calling out for Linda to keep up. Now, every step seemed heavier. When she returned home, the mailbox held a single envelope, addressed to Linda and Mark Thompson, no return address. Inside was a formal invitation to a campus event Sophie's group was organizing. The new name was printed clearly at the top. Linda's heart leapt and fell at the same time. She showed the invitation to Mark. He read it, brow furrowed. "Do we go?" he asked. Linda hesitated. Maybe this is her way of reaching out. Or maybe it's just part of the new life. That night, Linda lay awake, replaying the day in her mind. She tried to imagine what she would say to Sophie if she saw her again, how she would react to hearing that new name aloud for the first time. As the house grew dark and quiet, Linda clung to hope, thin, fragile, but still there, that some part of her daughter might still remember the life and the people she'd left behind. The invitation sat on the fridge for days, its sharp corners curling slightly in the kitchen humidity. Every time Linda passed, she ran her fingers over the paper, tracing the new name printed in bold letters. She thought of calling Sophie, rehearsing possible greetings in her head, but never found the right words. On Friday, Mark suggested they attend the campus event. She sent the invitation. Maybe she wants us there. Linda wasn't sure. The thought of seeing her daughter surrounded by strangers, introducing herself with a name Linda had never spoken, made her stomach twist. Still, that evening, they dressed in their best, Linda choosing the blue blouse Sophie always complimented, Mark in his pressed shirt and slacks. The campus hummed with energy. Student groups had set up tables, bright banners waving in the breeze. Linda felt both proud and out of place, clutching her purse, eyes scanning for a familiar face. Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder as they checked in at the registration table. A young woman with short, dyed hair and a confident smile greeted them. "Are you here for the panel?" she asked, glancing at their invitation. Linda nodded. We're looking for our daughter. Linda stopped herself, uncertain which name to use. The woman's smile didn't falter. "She's inside, setting up. You're welcome to wait." The auditorium buzzed with conversation. Mark and Linda settled into seats near the back, their nerves fraying with every passing minute. A group of students gathered on stage, arranging chairs, testing microphones. Linda spotted Sophie, no, her daughter, moving confidently among them, clipboard in hand, dressed in business casual, hair pulled back, eyes alight with purpose. For a moment, Linda saw flashes of the little girl who once begged her to volunteer at the school science fair, the teenager who'd organized the food drive, the daughter whose laughter used to fill their house. Now, she moved with a new assurance, surrounded by peers who called her by a name that still felt foreign to Linda's ears. The event began. Student speakers told stories of finding their place, of forging new paths and building chosen families. Sophie took the stage last, introducing herself with her new name, her voice strong and clear. She spoke about reinvention, independence, and the importance of claiming one's identity. The audience applauded, and Linda's chest ached with a confusing mix of pride and grief. During the reception, Mark approached the refreshment table while Linda lingered nearby, uncertain whether to wait or approach her daughter. Sophie mingled easily, hugging friends, answering questions, laughing at inside jokes. When she finally spotted her parents, she paused, then walked over, a careful smile on her lips. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." Her voice was warm but slightly formal, a practiced calm masking whatever emotion flickered beneath. Linda smiled, swallowing her nerves. "You did great up there. We're proud of you." Mark nodded, searching his daughter's face for signs of the child he remembered. There was an awkward pause before Sophie, her new name on the name tag, asked if they were enjoying themselves. Linda said yes, fighting the urge to reach out, to hug her, to call her by the name she'd whispered for years. Instead, she asked about Sophie's classes, her friends, her plans for summer. Sophie answered politely, but the conversation was tentative, a dance around all the words left unspoken. The room grew louder, the crowd denser. After a while, Sophie excused herself to help clean up. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It means a lot." Linda watched her disappear into the swirl of students, unsure whether to feel closer or more distant than before. On the drive home, Mark broke the silence. "She seemed happy." Linda nodded, blinking back tears. "I just hope she knows we're still her family, no matter what name she chooses." That night, Linda lay awake, replaying the encounter, every word, every hesitation. In her heart, the ache of loss mingled with the stubborn hope that, somehow, the love between parent and child might find its way through even the most unfamiliar territory. The days after the campus event felt strangely suspended. Linda moved through her routines on autopilot: work, groceries, church, the endless cycle of small tasks. She replayed the panel in her mind, Sophie's poised speech, the way she'd stood tall on stage, the gentle reserve in her eyes when she greeted her parents afterward. Linda wanted to call her, to say all the things she hadn't found the words for in that busy auditorium, but doubt kept her silent. Mark busied himself with chores around the house. He trimmed the hedges, organized the garage, fixed a leaky faucet that had dripped all winter. Whenever Linda found him lost in thought, he would shake his head and say, "I'm just tired," but Linda knew better. In the evenings, he lingered over old photo albums, sometimes closing them abruptly and leaving the room when the memories felt too close. Midweek, the church called. Mrs. Winslow needed help assembling welcome baskets for new parishioners. Linda agreed, grateful for something to keep her hands busy. In the church basement, she found herself surrounded by women she'd known for years. Conversation drifted from recipes to grandchildren to college news. "How's Sophie?" someone asked, innocent and warm. Linda hesitated. "She's doing well. Busy with school." "She always was a go-getter," Mrs. Winslow said. "You must be so proud." Linda nodded, forcing a smile, feeling the disconnect between what she said and what she felt. Back at home, a letter arrived, handwritten, addressed in Sophie's careful script. Linda opened it with trembling fingers. The letter was long and thoughtful, explaining more about the decision to change her name. Sophie described feeling lost at college, wanting to find her own path, and the importance of starting fresh. She reassured Linda and Mark that her love for them had not changed, but she needed to figure out who she was, on her own terms. Linda sat at the kitchen table, reading the letter over and over. Tears fell onto the page, smudging the ink. She called Mark in, and they read it together, alternating between silence and bursts of conversation, sometimes hopeful, sometimes angry, sometimes simply sad. That weekend, Mark suggested they take a drive to the state park where the family used to go for picnics. Linda packed a lunch, and they set out under a bright sky, the old minivan rattling along familiar roads. At the park, they wandered the trails, remembering afternoons with Sophie, frisbees, potato salad, laughter echoing among the trees. Sitting on a bench, Linda asked, "Do you think she'll come back to us?" Mark squeezed her hand. "Maybe not the same way, but she's still ours." On Sunday, Linda returned to the church for service. During the final hymn, she closed her eyes and offered a quiet prayer, not for Sophie to go back to who she was, but for strength, for patience, for the courage to let love change shape if it had to. That evening, Linda drafted a reply to Sophie's letter. She wrote about missing her, about family memories, about how proud she was of Sophie's independence, even when it hurt. She signed the letter with love, using both names, old and new, hoping to bridge the space between past and present. As she slipped the envelope into the mailbox, Linda realized that this was what parenting meant, loving fiercely, even through heartbreak, and holding on, even as you learn to let go. Spring advanced, bringing warm breezes and blossoms to the neighborhood, but inside the Thompson house, the changes felt more like winter thawing, slow, uncertain, and messy. Linda checked the mail each day, hoping for a response to her letter, her heart jumping at every handwritten envelope. Most days brought only bills, church bulletins, and a handful of graduation announcements from neighbors' children. One afternoon, as Linda returned from the grocery store, she found Mark sitting on the porch, the new name scrawled on a postcard in his hand. He turned it over for her to see. "She says she's visiting a friend up north for break. She's doing well." He handed the card to Linda, his expression unreadable. Linda traced her fingers over the message, searching for warmth in the carefully chosen words. That weekend, Linda's sister Marianne came to visit. She brought lemon bars and stories about her own grown children, one teaching abroad, another moving in with a partner the family hadn't yet met. The sisters sat in the kitchen, sunlight streaming over the tile, the conversation winding from small-town gossip to family worries. "She's still your daughter," Marianne said, placing a gentle hand on Linda's arm. "Even if she needs space, she'll find her way back." Linda nodded, unsure. "I just want to know her. I want her to know us." Later that day, Mark called Sophie's old phone number on a whim. The voicemail picked up, her voice, but with the new name in the greeting. He listened twice before leaving a message, stumbling over what to call her, what to say. "It's Dad. Just checking in. We love you. We're always here." Sunday evening brought a call from Mrs. Winslow at the church. She invited Linda and Mark to a potluck for families with college students. Linda agreed, thinking the distraction might help. At the gathering, familiar faces asked the same gentle questions. "Any news from Sophie? Is she home for break?" Linda practiced her new answers. "She's traveling. She's finding her way." It became easier to say, but not easier to feel. After the potluck, Mark drove Linda home in silence. She watched the streetlights flicker past, each one marking another mile of distance between their old life and whatever lay ahead. The next morning, Linda cleaned out the hall closet, sorting through forgotten coats, hats, and a box labeled, "Sophie, Keepsakes." Inside were childhood treasures, a paint-splattered T-shirt, homemade Mother's Day cards, a collection of pressed flowers in a scrapbook. Linda sat on the floor, leafing through each page, letting herself grieve the girl she'd raised, and accept the woman she was becoming. Later that night, Linda wrote an email, short and simple. Just wanted you to know we're thinking of you. The lilacs in the yard are blooming. Your favorite. Love, Mom. She hesitated over the signature, then added the new name, too. The reply didn't come that night, or the next. But Linda felt lighter, having reached out, refusing to let silence settle between them. Upstairs, Mark flipped through an old photo album. He paused at a snapshot of a grinning, muddy-faced child, arms flung wide in the backyard. He smiled, quietly, and closed the album, feeling something shift inside, not closure, but maybe the first step toward peace. As the house settled into quiet, Linda stood by the window, watching the breeze lift the curtains. In the stillness, she whispered a silent promise. No matter who you are, you will always be ours. The days crept toward Sophie's birthday, the first since the name change, and Linda felt the tension growing inside her chest with each sunrise. She walked the aisles at the card shop, picking up birthday cards with "Daughter" in gold letters, then setting them back, uncertain what to choose. She finally settled on a blank card decorated with wildflowers, planning to write her own message, simple, sincere, and as true as she could make it. Mark suggested they bake a cake anyway, as they always had. If she comes by, or if she calls, we'll be ready, he said, reaching for the old recipe box. Linda agreed, though she didn't say how much it hurt to whisk batter and remember the birthdays when the kitchen had been filled with balloons, laughter, and sticky-fingered friends. On the morning of Sophie's birthday, the house was unusually still. Linda made coffee and set out the card on the kitchen table, next to a small wrapped gift, a silver pendant she'd chosen for its simplicity, something that felt new and hopeful. Mark came in with the mail, a couple of bills and a card addressed to both of them in Sophie's handwriting. Linda opened it carefully. Inside was a note. Thank you for understanding, even when it's hard. I'm spending today with friends but thinking of you. I hope you know how much I love you, even if things are different now. Signed with the new name. Tears pricked Linda's eyes, but she smiled through them. She passed the card to Mark, who read it slowly, nodding as he set it back down. They sat together in silence for a while, both thinking of all the years before and all the ways their daughter was changing. In the afternoon, Marianne called to wish Sophie a happy birthday. Linda handed over the phone, and Marianne left a voicemail, her tone bright and loving. We're all so proud of you. Call us if you can. There's cake waiting. Later, neighbors stopped by with good wishes and a plate of cookies, asking if Sophie would be joining the family for dinner. Linda managed a smile. She's busy with friends, but we'll celebrate when she can. That evening, Linda lit a single candle on the cake. She and Mark sang softly, just the two of them, their voices mingling with laughter and memory. They each made a wish, silent, private, but woven together in hope. After dinner, Linda sat at her desk, writing a long letter. She described the day, the card, the cake, the neighbor's kindness, and how proud she was, no matter what name her daughter carried. She attached a photo of the cake and hit send, closing the laptop with a sense of gentle release. Before bed, Linda placed the silver pendant in a small box by the door, just in case Sophie stopped by in the days ahead. She turned out the lights and joined Mark on the porch, where the stars hung quietly above the yard. They sat together, hands intertwined, learning, slowly and painfully, how to celebrate the love that endures, even as everything else changes. A week after Sophie's birthday, the Thompson house felt quieter, but less brittle. Linda watered the garden in the morning, watching bees dip in and out of the lilacs that always made her think of Sophie, her daughter's laughter echoing in old springs, the memory as vivid as the flowers themselves. Mark repaired a loose board on the back fence, pausing now and then to glance toward the road, half hoping to see a familiar figure appear at the gate. Saturday brought a knock on the door. Linda opened it to find Sophie, her hair newly cut, a satchel slung over her shoulder, and an awkward, hopeful smile on her face. "Hi, Mom," she said softly, using the new name. "Can I come in?" Linda's heart stuttered, then surged. She stepped back, pulling her daughter into a hug that felt at once unfamiliar and entirely right. Mark joined them in the kitchen, where Linda poured iced tea and set out slices of leftover birthday cake. They talked for hours. Sophie described her classes, her new friends, the volunteer work she'd started on campus. She told stories of mistakes and small victories, her voice animated, her laughter bright. Linda listened closely, noticing how Sophie's gestures and expressions, so much her own, so deeply familiar, broke through the strangeness of the new name. Eventually, Sophie grew quiet. She looked at her parents, searching their faces. "I know this hasn't been easy for you," she said. "But I never wanted to hurt you. I needed to figure out who I am, but I still love you. I always will." Linda reached across the table, covering Sophie's hand with her own. "We love you too. Always. We're still learning, but you'll always be ours." They shared a long, silent moment, the distance between them softening, not erased but changed, something they could learn to live with. Before Sophie left, Linda pressed the small box with the silver pendant into her hand. "A little something from home," she said. Sophie smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom. For everything." Mark walked Sophie out to the porch. They stood for a while, talking quietly. Linda watched from the window, letting herself hope that visits like this, awkward, real, healing, might happen again. As evening settled, Linda tidied the kitchen, putting away teacups and cake plates, her heart fuller than it had been in months. Mark came in, smiling softly. "She's going to be okay," he said. Linda nodded, thinking of all the ways love could change shape and still endure. She stood at the kitchen window as dusk spread over the yard, whispering her daughter's new name, a name that was, slowly, becoming part of the family story.